I'd like to welcome you all to the Suncoast Climate Change Symposium. Thank you for coming here on our beautiful USF Sarasota Manatee campus. Let me just let you know what we're going to do tonight. So we'll eventually have Dr. Harold Wanless give his talk, but we have a few things that come up before that. First, we have a speaker here from the City of Sarasota, the sustainability manager, Stevie Freeman Montez. She'll and clap after she speaks. And then we also have a video contest. The winners will be shown for our student videos that were produced in response to the question, what does climate change mean to their generation? And we have quite a variety, some of which were actually shown at the Sarasota Film Festival this past weekend. And then we will take a little break. We've got a few snacks outside. You can go out and see some of the posters that our partners at Marine have on display with some of the things that they're doing in their environmental program with coral reefs. And grab a little snack to eat and some water perhaps, and then we'll come back in and have our main keynote speaker. So to me, I'm not a climate scientist. I'm a molecular biologist. I'm a Florida native. I've been here a long time. They just interviewed me on TV, and they were asking about what you think we'll see happening. And I think part of the thing is it's so slow. There's a lot of question. Anybody who's paid any attention to this issue knows there's a lot of controversy that it isn't real. When I invited students to make videos, I said, it's open to anyone. If you want to produce one that you want to give some scientific data that shows why every other scientist is wrong, you're free to do that. We didn't get any such submissions. It's my feeling that I think this generation is sort of recognizes this as just, it's a thing. They don't question it as much, perhaps. Not that questioning is a bad thing. I don't want to say that. As scientists, you should question your results. We always do. But to me, the analogy I think that works for this pretty well, and some of us are old enough to remember when smoking wasn't thought of as a bad thing, right? There was research that showed actually smoking wasn't bad for you. Who funded that research, right? There was even a point at which I remember seeing some ads, this is before my time, where they said it was good for you even. Maybe if you stop to light your cigarette and you avoid getting run over by a bus because you stopped from stepping out in the street, that saved your life. Okay, but it was a controversial topic for a little while. And then it isn't anymore, right? Is there anybody who questions it very much? Who funded that research, right? There was money funding. Who has a vested interest in it? It was funded by tobacco companies. So there is research now that funds that climate change isn't an actual thing, but when you trace where the money comes from for a lot of that research, then it comes from people who have a vested interest in us burning fossil fuels. I just said to the interview earlier, if everybody is wrong, what's the worst that happens? We have cleaner air and we all get an electric car, so it's not a bad thing. I'm still waiting for my flying car I was promised on the Jetsons, and all that when I watched that cartoon, but yet to see that. So it is a really serious topic, though. I think that one of the best things we can do is become aware and start thinking and believing the research that shows it's going to happen. And really, we need to start thinking about what it is we can do, which also requires research. What are you going to do to sort of alleviate, circumvent, deal with what may be coming? So I think that our first speaker will probably have some things to say about that. And so I'd like to welcome her up to the podium. I think she's got a few PowerPoints to show.
All right. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Alcock, A-L-C-O-C-K.
Great. I love the good energy going.
Associate Professor
sure.
of Political
I think
Science
I have
and
a clicker
Environmental
too,
Studies
maybe.
at
They're
college.
getting it loaded up.
So in
Thank
your
you.
research, what have you
I love the energy going into tonight with the great music, and it's like positive. I wasn't expecting that coming into it, so it's a refreshing change to some of the conversations that happen around this. I first of all want to thank you all for being here tonight, because you're here learning We're having conversations locally on local action and what we need to do and what's happening here in Sarasota in our region. And that's where it really has to happen. And I don't know about you all, but I'm feeling even more invigorated lately to get involved locally in addressing and talking about climate change and sea level rise issues and adaptation. So specifically, I'm here to talk to you tonight about what the city of Sarasota is doing related to our climate change adaptation plan. I'm told I have 10 minutes, no more, so I'm probably going to be talking way too fast, but I'm very passionate about this issue, and I think it's just a really important project, and I'm proud the city's doing it, and just want to kind of give you a brief overview. Really, the purpose of why we're doing a climate adaptation plan at the city of Sarasota is because we provide really important public services. I know that's kind of obvious, but every time we turn a water on, the water that comes out, our water pumping and water supply, our water treatment process is critical to ensure the health of our bay, our roadways, our stormwater management, our park systems, all these really critical, important public services that the city provides. We have to plan for those services to be useful in the future. And so it would be irresponsible for us to not look at some of the science coming out around climate projections and make sure that we're looking and understanding that science and trying our best to integrate upgrades and changes into our infrastructure decisions, because some of these infrastructure changes last for a long time. And so we can make really important things happen now. And one of the big purposes of this is also to get city staff, myself included, more comfortable talking about climate data and climate science. It can be a little confusing at first, a little overwhelming, and so we've done a lot of workshops and trainings over the last year to improve and elevate the city staff's comfort level and confidence in climate data. And of course, we'll have a wealth of information at the end of this to help relate and educate to the public around vulnerable areas and projections. So these are just a real high-level 6-step process of what the city is doing to create our climate adaptation plan. We first, back in I think it was November, our city commission unanimously approved a set of projections that we would use for our climate adaptation plan. And that was big because we got clarity around it. We spent a long time looking at different scenarios and different projections, and we kind of took a stance, a point in time, and said, we're going to be using this right now for our climate adaptation plan for sea level. So we agreed on projections for sea level rise, storm surge, precipitation, and flooding projections and heat. Then we identified all those services that I mentioned earlier that we were going to look closely at an engineering level, and where we were going to see were vulnerable to these climate projections. Then we're going to prioritize those vulnerabilities, get public input to help us prioritize those vulnerabilities as well, and create adaptation strategies for our greatest vulnerabilities. So that's kind of the steps of the plan. And of course, there will be, once we have these adaptation strategies, I have no idea what they'll be at this point, but we will be in the implementation phase. Some things may be far out. There'll be big financial decisions we'll have to have a lot of public support or public conversation about. So we're just trying to be more strategic about how we're going to do adaptation projects. We're on step 3 here, where we're doing a ranking system, so I'll go into that. I'm sure we're going to hear much about this later with our keynote speaker, but I wanted to mention the historical data seen from this our local tidal gauge in St. Petersburg. This tidal gauge has been taking readings from 1947. These are facts. These are not any observed unknown scenario planning involved in any of this at all. So this is just readings from a tidal gauge of sea levels, and this shows from 1947 to present day just under about a 7-inch rise in sea levels here locally. So that rate of change also is showing a small increase in recent decades, and that is informing our projections into the future. So I just like to kind of separate the historical observed, what we've seen, what's already been observed, with the projections. Projections are different, historical is different, but they inform each other. This is a confusing graph, but what it's really getting at is the extreme precipitation events regionally are increasing. And for example, in 2013, you see a bar that goes up to 30%, and what that is saying is 30% of the year's rainfall came from one 24-hour extreme rain event. And so this trend line is going slightly up. It's showing that we're increasing our extreme rain events, and as a city, that's important for us to understand and look at closely because of flooding and stormwater roles that we have. This is related to heat data. It's based on the data station 5 miles east of Bradenton near the airport here, and shows since 1964, an increase of 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit for the average mean temperature of our air. So that's local data as well that informs our projections. So this is, again, historical, just readings. Now we're getting a little bit into the projections, which I think sometimes can be, confusing for folks. What the city of Sarasota is using is the NOAA projections, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association projections. I can never say their name right. National Oceanic Atmospheric Association. It's the longest name, NOAA. So those are the projections that we're using, federal government data. And so we are regionally correcting our projections based on the rate of change being observed in St. Petersburg. And also these projections, I just want to call out because some people might say, well, that's a little different from what I see here or there. These projections are based on a 2015 sea level. So from today's date, from today's levels, when I'm out at the water today, what can I expect to see in 2050, 2100, 2030? And if you have a different base year, there might be different projections. So I just want to call that out. I have the intermediate high projection highlighted because that's often what our starting point. And I noticed on the sheet, there's some explanation on the different scenarios and why there are scenarios. A lot of people say, oh, the further out you get, it might be less reliable data. And I think that's incorrect to think of it that way. I think the further out we get to 2050 and 2100, there's just such a range of possible outcomes based on how we humans behave and respond now, based on what emission scenarios we're going to implement over time and what those outcomes will be. So that's why there's a range of outcome. And so this, I want to see, this is in Longboat. I want to show a high tide day out at Longboat. We did a tour. I know some people here were on the tour with me, where we had salt water coming up through the storm drains, and we took a lot of pictures. And I just think this is a really powerful visual to show, not to just scare everybody, but to show that we are seeing impacts here locally on our barrier islands right now. And the right-hand picture is an example of an adaptation measure. That's called a duckbill valve, where they put it over a storm drain to try to keep the water out. And they're trying different things out at Longboat to see what they can do to address this flooding. So these are just projections around heat and air and water temperature. The increase in air temperature is projected to increase 3.5 to 5.5 or 3.6 to 5.4 by 2050, which would result in 50 to 60 days annually above 95. So that's an important public health consideration for us to think of and integrate over time. I have actually Larry Stoltz photos here. He's in the audience today. This is an example of a king tide photo, which is a very extreme high tide, and so I think they're really impactful. But what this slide is discussing is extreme precipitation, and that flooding is slated. What the projections we're using is 5 to 10% increase in 2050. So this, I know, has way too much information on it, but I wanted to just give a snapshot of the amount of assets and infrastructure that the city of Sarasota is looking at where we're vulnerable at. We're looking at our public, our parks, our stormwater, transportation, wastewater, water supply, water features, critical buildings for emergency management, and coastal resiliency, which is our shorelines and natural systems. So it's over 220 assets, and it's a lot. And that's what we're trying to understand where our biggest issues are. The regional momentum, there's so many people here in the room that I didn't even include on this that I regret, but there's a lot of regional momentum happening right now, which I'm really excited to see and in some cases be a part of. I coordinate an intergovernmental climate working group, which is an informal group of staff from all cities in Sarasota County, planners and staff, to discuss what each other are doing or not doing, related to climate change, and kind of help train each other and trade language and projection and data. I also you know, the Sarasota County has done some sea level rise analysis internally. The Sarasota Bay Estuary Program is doing a climate change vulnerability assessment. The Science and Environment Council of Southwest Florida is very active on this issue and is a consortium of really science-based, important nonprofits and academic institutions. MOATS, I know Dr. Emily Hall is here. She has a strong ocean acidification research occurring, and they have a climate ambassador program and Marine Policy Institute that has published local policy tools for adaptation. I didn't include it, but this Spaceship Earth is a global nonprofit that's so active here locally as well on climate awareness and education and tools. So there's just so much happening, and I'm just happy to see so much momentum in this room as well to learn more. So what can you do? I try to wanted to leave on something like this with the last slide, but to support local science approaches or any science approaches, and to support where you can. I love that everybody's learning here. To our speaker, who's going to talk so much about the science behind projections and what we can expect. Of course, I got to plug local government efforts, you know, but also, of course, looking at our own personal contribution and our spheres of influence, so to speak, in your neighborhoods or your organizations, your businesses, your family, from the personal to the big, to try to do what we can to lower our dependence on fossil fuels and burning carbon dioxide and other dirty fuels, so that we can have an impact on what scenario we're going to see and what impacts we're going to see. And yeah, that's the basis of, you know, my presentation. But more than anything, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Brian, for inviting me and the opportunity to come share a little bit at a high level of what the city is doing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Stevie. I think I regrettably forgot to say who I was. I'm the Dean of the College of Science and Math on this campus, which just started in July. My name is Paul Kirchman. And so I think at the end, perhaps if Stevie can stay around, and then after Dr. Wanless goes, we'll definitely have some time for questions. And if any of you had kids or grandchildren who want to come to college in Sarasota, show them a picture of the beach. And tell them to move down here, and they can come to my college and study biology or psychology or communication or engineering, or you can ask me about it anytime. So the next thing I want to, it occurred to me that I wanted to show you something about questioning science. And it's an ironic thing. I noticed on the Facebook page for this event, if any of you have that, Facebook, and another person made a comment that said, climate change, climate has always changed, and here's some scientific data that shows that climate has changed forever. And I think the implication is that they want to say is, well, climate just changes, so what are we worried about? Or on the other hand, they want to say, but now we don't need to listen to the scientists' warning because climate always changes, so there's nothing you can do about it. To me, I'm not sure that the people see the irony in the fact that they're paying attention to what scientists have said in the past, but now at this point they want to say, but what they're predicting for the future, that's just, that's bunk, forget that. The only way you know that this happened was because you paid, that you funded research into this area. And so how do you get this data besides paying attention to scientists? So I think that we are training some really good scientists in this college. We gave them the opportunity to present, or even on this campus, I don't even know that all our video producers were necessarily science students, which is great. Really, this topic can impact anyone. Business, real estate certainly, tourism, farmers. Who's been in Sarasota long enough to remember when Sarasota was growth zone 9? If you're a person who grows plants, right? right? Isn't it solidly, it's 10 now, right? Stuff's moving north. So we're going to grow coconuts here, I suppose, now. And I guess next what we want to do is show these student videos, and we're going to do those in reverse order. These come with cash prizes that are kindly provided by our sponsor there, Mr. Brian Hunter, who's waving in the back of the room. He wanted to sort of stay in the background, but there he is. And I haven't yet told the students which place they were in. And so this, in fact, is video winner of $50 prize, number 5, 5th place, which was actually chosen to be shown at the Sarasota Film Festival. This is one of the 3 videos that they showed there. So they're, more into artistic interpretations, and I think you'll see what I mean when you watch this. That was Joanna Chmiel. I'm not exactly sure how to say that last name. Are you here, Joanna? Yeah, hi. Clearly an artistic interpretation there in black and white with the, how do you get the lines that run back and forth? I don't think anybody has the old kind of Super 8 camera anymore. I'm not sure, but that was a cool effect, right? So that was, as I said, an artistic interpretation. The other ones are a little more literal about the question of what climate change means. I mean, clearly erosion and evaporation and melting ice. You were worried that we were going to watch the whole cup melt, weren't you? All right, so next we have the 4th place video that also wins a $50 prize. That was produced by Lisa Kuhn.
What does climate change mean to our generation? As defined by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, climate change refers to any change in measures of climate lasting for an extended period of time. Climate change includes major changes in temperature, precipitation, wind pattern, and other effects that occur over several decades or longer. Our generation is faced with the reality of science and the skepticism of politics. So much so that according to Gallup Politics, 1 in 4 people in the United States are skeptical about climate change. However, climate change is real. a study titled Quantifying the Consensus on Anthropogenic Global Warming in the Scientific Literature, analyzed 11,944 peer-reviewed scientific literature sources about climate change. This study found that 97.1% of these papers endorse the consensus position that humans are causing global warming. Climate change is happening right now. There is overwhelming evidence that climate change is already impacting us now. This last July, 2016, was the single hottest month on Earth in recorded history. And between 2015 and 2016, there were 8 recorded 500-year events. A 500-year event describes how likely a certain weather pattern is to happen in that year. Most markedly last year was all the flooding that happened in Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Maryland. This flooding displaced thousands of people from their homes. My generation needs to shift away from, is climate change real, and turn to a conversation about what we are going to do to prevent climate change from getting worse. The biggest fight this generation faces are the phasing out of burning fossil fuels, and it is going to happen if we want to change anything and continue to live on this planet for future generations. We are already seeing the beginning phases of extreme weather due to climate change, and it's only going to get worse. We can no longer stay silent on such an important topic. It is time to take action, talk about climate change in a way that people understand, and address it as the reality that scientific evidence has presented to us. Climate change is real, and humans are the main cause. Now is the time to change our habits to better support our future.
Lisa, are you here? Yeah. Oh, hi. Stand up. Good. I'll tell you all how I know that people under age 30 don't look at their email, or I suspect why they don't. And my sons are both in that group, and they don't answer their phone either. You know that. You have to text them, right? So we had prize money to offer these students, and they're going to get that. So I emailed them and said, hey, you're going to win a prize. Let me know your email, and we can send you a gift card. And there were 7 who I contacted, and 3 got back to me. So when you're offering somebody real money and you're not a prince from Africa and you need an investment to get it started, so if you want to get in touch with your kids or grandkids, you probably don't want to email them. You got to text. So send me your email you want your money sent to, Lisa. The next is a team, actually, of a research group for video number 3, which wins a $100 prize. Alexander McClure, Jessica Skinner, and Susie Bennett, who are working with one of our professors, Dr. Aparna Terlang, who works on mosquitoes. And so their video is actually about the effects that it will have with mosquitoes, that climate change.
As students working closely with mosquitoes, it's natural for us to see climate change from the perspective of the mosquito. Climate change has had numerous notable impacts, one of them being increasing temperatures. This is particularly concerning because it has contributed to the expansion of mosquito species throughout the world. Specifically affecting the U.S., mosquito species from tropical areas have been expanding northward at an alarming rate. Mosquitoes are notorious for their abilities to transmit disease. The more well-known invasive species, like Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, have been highly involved in the transmission of the Zika, West Nile, and Eastern equine encephalitis, among other diseases as well. Species that have, until recently, been restricted to the Caribbean and South America, like Culex panicosa and Eodemia squamopennus, have made their way into Florida. Culex panicosa is capable of spreading Venezuelan equine encephalitis, which can also cause serious illness and even death in humans. Oftentimes, we tend to think of mosquitoes on the scale of how much they affect humans, but we are not the only ones affected by these vectors of disease. Eodemia squamopennus, one of the new species that has made its way to the States, has a strong preference for birds. In fact, it is able to spread bird malaria, including the kind that devastated the bird populations in Hawaii. Warmer temperatures have created a situation where various mosquito species have more habitats in which they can thrive. Some bird populations are very susceptible to mosquito-transmitted diseases. Corvids, which are a family of birds that include crows, ravens, and jays, are particularly vulnerable and have a very high fatality rate when contracting diseases like West Nile. Other birds, like robins, are susceptible to West Nile virus but have low fatality rates and are migratory. This combination makes them super spreaders of the West Nile virus. The takeaway of this all is that aside from the direct changes in climate, like different average temperatures or a rising sea level, we may see dramatic changes in the distribution of some creatures as they become more able to move from the tropics to the warmer northern climates. In the case of mosquitoes, we may see an increase in cases of illness and possibly witness harm to numerous impacted species, ranging from humans to horses to birds. Climate change is something that needs to be further studied if we want to have the opportunity to preserve the biological diversity on our planet. For our generation, this is something we will need to focus on, working to make progress that helps us to not see any further harm to our planet.
Susie, Jessica, Alexander, you all here? Yeah? Say? All right. Very good. And in second place, with a $200 prize, and also this video was shown at the Sarasota Film Festival, is a video by Christina King, who greeted you at the door, probably. There she is, huh? All right, and our number one video is produced by Louis Carey. Are you here? Is he here? Is he? Hey, there he is. All right. Hey, $300. Good job. And there we go.
The Oxford Dictionary defines climate change as a change in global or regional climate patterns. The question is, since when? Religion says the world has been around for only 10,000 years, while modern science says billions of years. Even if 10,000 years was right, the first modern-day record of the weather only dates back to 1766. That is 99.98% of unrecorded weather patterns. I'm not here to discuss religion or even the age of the Earth. Yes, climate change has happened before. The world has gone through periods of deep freeze and deep heat. Science proves that. But how much have we attributed to that? Before steam engines and skyscrapers, humans did little damage to the overall climate. Thinking for a second that we are totally void of blame for the current climate situation is unconscionable. We found a shiny new toy, fossil fuel, and we did what humans have been doing forever, and we exploited it. We used it more and more until it became so ingrained in our everyday lives that we needed it as much as we need oxygen. As Cameron Russell is quoted saying, "In the history of the world, all 5 mass extinctions have been accompanied by massive climate change, so we are facing an incredibly serious threat. In fact, we are technically in the 6th mass extinction right now, and it is the first mass extinction being attributed to humans." But there is hope. There are other sources of energy and other ways to live our lives without damaging the Earth nearly as much as we have been. Although we cannot reverse the damage we have done, we can help slow down the speed at which we are moving into this extreme heat. Climate change is something the world has been going through long before we came, and will continue to happen. We need to find a better way. We need to be better. The most important thing about global warming is this: whether humans are responsible for the bulk of climate change is going to be left to scientists. But it's all of our responsibility to leave this planet in better shape for the future generations than we found it. Mike Huckabee. We need everyone's help. This isn't something a small group of highly motivated people can achieve. This takes everyone. We need everyone.
Good job. That one was also shown at the film festival. They showed our top 2 and number 5. Very good job. Thank you, students. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Harold Wanless, who is the chair of the geology department at University of Miami and professor of geology at University of Miami. He got his PhD from Johns Hopkins University after coming from Princeton for his bachelor's degree, quite an impressive pedigree there, and also has more publications and invited talks than I could list in our entire time we have here, but I'm just glad that we are actually being added to that list of places that he's been invited to speak. So with no further ado, I'll invite Dr. Wanless up to see what he has to say tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Is this on? Okay, good. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for coming out. What I want to do today is show you some unfortunate realities. And the first one is that if we don't put in the buildup of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from our burning of fossil fuels, the models say that using all the fluctuations of the solar forcing and everything else you can think of, that climate would be doing this from the last century. But once you put in the carbon dioxide levels, you start to see, the models start to project what we see, the warming of the atmosphere, okay? And that brings up a very important thing, to make sure you understand what global warming, as the human-induced global warming is. We've always had greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. If we didn't, it would be too cold a planet to live on. But what we've done since the Industrial Revolution is add more and more and more carbon dioxide, primarily by burning gas, oil, coal, peat, all these things we can get our hands on to create energy and warmth. And those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, what they do is they capture the back radiation of the solar energy coming in, and it bounces off the Earth as a longer wavelength than it comes in at. And some of that back radiation gets caught by these greenhouse gases and turned into heat. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, water, chlorofluorocarbons, there's a whole bunch, but carbon dioxide is still the primary one. And it turns into heat. And if that was the end of the story, all we'd have to do is pull the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and everything would start to cool down. It's sort of like heating up your bathroom and then turning off the heater and it'll cool down, unless you have a big tub full of water. But as you might know, if you heat up your bathroom with a heater, the tub water will eventually warm up. And then you have a warm bathroom for days. What we have done, what has happened is over 93% of the heat that has been created in the atmosphere by global warming, by burning fossil fuels, has been transferred to the ocean, okay? And so here is just a graph, and there's one on the front page of the handout on your seat, that shows where the heat of the land and the atmosphere and the ice, some of it has gone into warming those things, and that's that, remember the 2 degrees we're worried about in the Paris Accord, not going above 2 degrees. We just passed 1 degree above pre-industrial levels this last year, 2016. But here's the heat in the ocean. Unbelievable. And you know enough physics, remember from high school, that water has a huge capacity to take in and hold heat. And this should put the hair up on the back of your neck, because we've really done it. We've heated up the ocean. How do you cool down an ocean? This isn't just the top 5 feet. This is the top several thousand meters. And so that's where we are. Here's another way of expressing it. Here's the heat in the ocean. And by the way, any of you students 20 years old? Anybody 20 years old here? Half the heat has gone into the ocean because of global warming since you were born. Okay? Everybody likes to blame, I was born in 1942, everybody likes to blame us folk for this problem. Yeah, we burned a lot of coal, a lot of gas, a lot of oil, dug up a lot of peat soils and things and burned a lot of wood, but we were less than 2 billion people on the planet when I was born. Now we're 7.5 and still rapidly increasing. And we've learned how to do more stuff, industrialize more intensely. So this is amazing. Here's what the Paris Accord was about, the 2% that's in the atmosphere, that's now over 1 degree above pre-industrial levels. A little bit in the continents, another couple percent has gone to warm ice. Okay, that's important to understand, because once you realize that global warming is really warming the ocean, you think of it a lot differently. You realize the mess we have created for ourselves. As we'll talk about, that warmed ocean is both expanding as it warms, and it's getting in around Greenland and Antarctica. And that's the problem. That's the big problem. In the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in their 4th report in 2007, they tried to reconstruct historical global sea levels. And they went back to like 1870 and up to wherever they were in 2000. And they showed a hinge here. There's some other projections now that are a little different, but this is exactly what the Miami Key West curves look like. And by the way, Florida's not really subsiding or elevating, so unlike the area from Savannah to New York City that's subsiding. So we're sort of get what the global sea level is. And so you can see that we were rising at a significant rate through the last century. And then in the 1990s, and we didn't realize it at first, but ice melt started on both Greenland and Antarctica. And that's picking up, and that's the big concern for the future. But presently, I should change this diagram. We're presently running at maybe 35 centimeters per century, 3.5 millimeters per year. If you're not used to metric, 30 centimeters equal a foot. So we're running just over a foot of sea level rise globally per century right now, okay? In spite of the fact that we have a governor that doesn't allow the words climate change, sea level rise, global warming to be used, in spite of the fact that we have our younger senator, Marco Rubio, that used to know about climate change but has unlearned it so he could get elected. It's real, and since 2009, all the agencies in the federal government have been required to incorporate meaningful sea level rise projections into all their civil works planning, past, present, and future. And in 2012, a NOAA document came out, part of the National Climate Assessment Program, and they had 4 projections. One of them was the historical rate, which would have been another 20 centimeters. We're already at 35, right, by the end of the century. So that didn't include any ice melt. So that's meaningless. I took that off. They had one with intermediate low that was about a half a meter. That's 1 foot 8 inches by the end of the century. That one had some ice melt, but no ice melt acceleration. Ice melt acceleration is how it happens, okay? It starts and it picks up, and there are all these feedbacks that I'll talk about some of. And so the 2 projections in which they had limited ice melt acceleration, in addition to expanding the ocean as it warms, and in their models, the largest anticipated ice melt are for 4.1 to 6.6 feet by 2100. And the problem is that those models do not incorporate many of these accelerating feedbacks that we are finding out about of how ice melts, these things that are speeding up the rate at which ice melts that aren't in the models. Some of them we don't know how to put in yet. They're too complicated. Some of them we're starting to put in. But the point is that these projections do not incorporate most of the accelerating feedbacks of ice melt we're observing on Greenland and Antarctica. And so my recommendation to communities is to use this one. That's a big one, 2 meters, 6.6 feet by the end of the century. And hope that we better understand this quickly so you can adapt it. And we're going to get there. We have warmed the ocean. This is not going to stop in 2070 or 2100. We have warmed the ocean. We are going to continue to have sea level rise. And by the way, atmospheric scientists say if we stop right now, globally, burning fossil fuels, putting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, the atmosphere will continue to warm for another 30 years, okay? And that'll get it up toward an equilibrium with the amount of carbon dioxide and the temperature of the atmosphere. But that heat is going to be constantly transferred to the ocean for centuries. And the carbon dioxide is still there. Ben Kirkman, a great climatologist at the University of Miami, in a talk recently said, when you drive to the store with your car and back, the carbon dioxide you put in the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, if you have a fossil fuel burning car, will stay in the atmosphere for 4,000 years. Once you understand that, it's like maybe you start to think differently about what we're doing. This isn't like the smog of a fireworks show that seems to disappear shortly, you know. We are doing something. Carbon dioxide doesn't transfer out very quickly. And we're doing everything we can to dig up as much as we can and burn it and have a lot of fun along the way. Well, we're going to pay the price, and our kids are going to pay the price and many generations down the road. But this is an important number because this is where the government is until the day before inauguration, where NOAA came out with an updated publication of this. And they added another one that went up to 8 feet by the end of the century. The importance of that is the more we learn about ice melt, we're not saying, oh, it's not going to be so bad. We're saying, uh-oh, it may be higher, it may be faster. Please understand that, okay? Here's my hometown. Here's the, this is Miami-Dade County and Broward County, where Fort Lauderdale is, our nuclear power plant, where they're trying to add 2 new reactors to meet the growing population later in the century. Yeah. But they charge us, every one of us, $6 every month to do the planning for that, even though it probably will never happen. But this is at 2 feet. These are normal high water, not the king tides. These are just normal high water. You can see the barrier islands, Miami Beach, Key Biscayne, are starting to be eaten at a little bit on the backside. And by the time we're 4 feet, well, it looks like there's a nice barrier island on the front side, but of course, that's going to be in jeopardy. And but I want you to just see that the low-lying coastal areas, this is mostly mangrove and freshwater swamp, but a lot of the low-lying coastal areas that are developed and the barrier islands, as we move through this century, are in serious, serious trouble. Yeah, we have a mayor, Levee of Miami Beach, who is spending over $500 million raising the roads, putting in mega pumps, and you can stand, and they suck the water before you even see it, and then it's polluted water, so they shoot it out into the bay, and so we're now having pollution problems in the bay. And he's saying we're going to fix Miami Beach so people are still going to be living here 1,000 years from now, just like they are today. That's almost, when you think about it, that's almost criminal, because that's encouraging people to invest in the condominiums there and think at the end of 30 or 50 years or whatever you want, you're going to have a nice sales with a nice profit, you know? And that's a problem we have with our low-lying coastal development right now. There aren't any real warnings. But as you can see, and as you can imagine, no matter what we do, as we progress this way through this century and beyond, we're going to start losing our freshwater resources, our sewage treatment plants, which are all in low-lying areas, ones out here, are going to be compromised. Our airports, one's in this valley here, we call the Miami River Valley. It's right there, that's where Miami International is. Fort Lauderdale's right there. And we're going to have increasing risks from storm protection. And at some point, the nightmare of any elected official, town or county, is the tax base is going to start to diminish because people are going to say, I have enough. Businesses are going to say, I don't need this. Okay? And so those maps do not show the king tides. Here's Miami Beach before the $500 million of pumps. Oh, the $500 million is bond money. That's not even real money. I thought they had a lot of money from all their tourism, but no, they're investing, hoping you come spend a lot of money so they can pay it off. But you know, these king tides are still a problem. And I was out with Elizabeth Colbert, the New Yorker, during one of the king tides, and this was unbelievable. This was on Miami Beach, and these are, you know, $1 to $10 million homes, many of them being upgraded, but you had to go through knee-deep water to get to them. It's crazy, you know? And you have this here. I find now giving talks to people that live on barrier islands, you're saying, you're not telling us anything we don't know. We're starting to have to live with it. And you didn't have to live with it 15 years ago. That's the interesting thing. So the important thing to understand about global warming, it's happening, it has arrived. That's just one of the higher tides on Fort Lauderdale Beach. That's not a big storm or something. That's just, it's arrived, you know? And that's where we are. And we're gonna, so those maps going on up, the king tides are gonna go 2 feet higher than this and 3 feet higher than this and so on. Those maps also don't show you the devastation by hurricanes. And this is a Category 2 Hurricane Ike, 2008, after it crossed the Boulevard Peninsula, which is just east of Galveston, okay? And there was one house left. And it's a very vulnerable island. The interesting thing is the FEMA money only let people rebuild there. You laugh, but it's your money. That's the problem, you know? And Lynn and I, my fiance Lynn's right over there. Say hi. You'll see her in Greenland in a minute. But yeah, they had no choice. It's rebuilt denser than it was before. Unbelievable. And that means somebody has to put in an infrastructure, I guess. So you're asking an increasingly risky infrastructure to be maintained in a place that's unbelievably risky from storm surges. Storm surges, by the way, are frightening. This is a misleading picture, but it sure is frightening anyhow. This is Katrina topping a levee. See the top of the levee there? But it's still horrible looking. It's coming across and shoot. I mean, a storm surge is just a lateral surge of water as far as it can get in. Brian Soden at the University of Miami, this is modeling hurricane surges with sea level rise. And here's Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 storm that was like this. Here's the inner part of the eye wall. It's 17 feet of sea level surge right there at the coast, but it didn't go very far inland. With a 3-foot rise of sea level, this is more than 3 foot higher and 3 feet higher, and it goes all in the area that the same storm would go through. It goes forever across Miami-Dade County. Okay, so these storm surges are probably what's going to drive us away because they're going to be increasingly risky, increasingly damaging to life and property. Yeah, so let me just stay with my home. Here's my home city here, Coral Gables. Had a wonderful mayor, Jim Kaysen. He's just stepping down after being termed out. But he has been planning here. He's looking at what to do for every 6 inches of sea level rise to maintain an integrated infrastructure. And it's funny things he's finding. Coral Gables was going to be a Venice of Florida or something. I know you have one over here, but they put in a lot of canals, and then the Hurricane of 26 hit, and it just sort of became another nice community. But he has found that all the bridges we put in on these canals, right now, you can get a certain size boat through on a really low tide. And that influences the value of the house up inside. It raised sea level 2 feet, value of the house is going down. You can't get as big a boat through. And we have something like 300 bridges. You can't raise them all. Anyhow, he also found out that this is just the first 2 feet of sea level rise, that we have filled areas out in the mangroves here that are the high-end tax-based communities, homes. And they're going to be the first to go as sea level rises. So there you're starting to look at the reality of financing what we need to do in a city. So, but this is what every community should be doing, is this honest looking ahead and figuring out what to do and giving honest, fair warning, transparent warning to the people. So here we are at 4 feet and 6 feet. These are just normal high tides. And these are, according to the U.S. government projections, those two that I looked at, 4.1 to 6.6, where we would be at these. The interesting thing about this map here is that 3/4 of this that looks like land is less than 2 feet above sea level. Here's the 8 foot, right? So that's what was greater than 2 feet above sea level at 6 foot. So we really lose buildable or survivable land. And people always look, oh, my house is still there, wonderful. No fresh water, no sewage, probably no electricity, because Turkey Point's down here where it's gone. Here's our $1 billion tunnel out to our shipping, Dodge Island. Here's the international airport. You get the idea. So, and let me take you on the next 2 feet, because sea level is not going to stop at the end of the century. 9% of Miami-Dade County is greater than 10 feet above sea level. You know, and you say, why do you live there? Because it's beautiful, we love it. You know, why do you live on your barrier islands? You don't have anything 10 feet above sea level there, I don't think, unless you filled it in or something. But because we love it there. And we're going to live there as long as we can, but we should not be spending money stupidly. Sometimes I suggest we should be setting aside money for helping people relocate. What? That's un-American, you know? But think about it. It might have been cheaper back in that picture of the Boulevard Peninsula to help people relocate rather than putting all the houses back and putting infrastructure back. Australia is already announcing at what sea level rise certain areas will no longer have maintained infrastructure. That's pretty good. Okay. About 3 years ago, Brian Soda and I started giving separate talks over in Naples because Naples thought that climate change, global warming, was a Miami problem. And the thing is that, yeah, we get a lot of press, but that's because we have a lot of apparent assets in all our condos and things like that. So here's Miami, here's Naples with a 6 foot of sea level rise. So, okay. Yeah, they're a little vulnerable too, right? Okay. Here's Fort Myers, Sanibel, Captiva, Port Charlotte, South Venice, here. And, you know, you have some pretty high upland here that you don't see with the first 10 feet, but all the coastal areas, including along the estuaries, are really hit strongly by this. And amazing, huh? And here we are. Sarasota's right here. And you have nice high land back here. And it gets higher. And you know, in Miami, we go over that coastal ridge and into the Everglades. We don't have anywhere to migrate to. You do. We had a talk in Clearwater last a year or two ago in November, and one of the questions, it was a 2-day event, and one of the questions was, should they be planning for migration upland, sort of? And you can ask that question, you know. We can't in South Florida. We're coming over. We're going to hopefully buy right here before you do. So, if you all know Google Earth, right? You can go on the computer, and if you get close up enough, you can scan around with your cursor and see elevation. It's quite impressive as you go west of I-75. But anyhow, here, and the problem is I'll come in close because it looks like nothing's happening. And, yeah, I want to go in close in a minute, but I just want to point out that barrier islands are very vulnerable to sea level rise. And the kind of things we're going to be seeing are coastal erosion. This is the south end of North Captiva from 94 to 2016. And, you know, it's set back a bit, you know? And the other thing we're going to have with rising sea level is the storms do blow through barrier islands, often at the ebb surge of a storm. It'll often cut an inlet. But as sea level rises, there's more area behind that's going to be flooded by the tides. So the tides are going to be stronger going in and out. So we're going to find more and more inlets that used to close right after a storm, stay open. But this is just one. And there are a bunch of houses just off view here. But, you know, So these kind of risks are going to increase. And this is your neck of the woods here. And this is unbelievable because it's been pretty, is the next one? Yeah. What amazed me, you're an old community for Florida, I think, you know. When you look to the old photos, that's not that old, I know, but when you look back 20 years or so, it's unbelievable. Everything was pretty well built out back then. And you haven't had any mega hurricanes to modify the landscape, so you're pretty lucky. But there's a lot of really vulnerable areas, and as these areas, as sea level rises, here's 1 foot, here's Sarasota, Lido Key, Longboat, Siesta. There's 1 foot of sea level rise, 4 feet. You can start to see a real problem here. And these are just normal high tides. By the way, if you want to go look at your house or somebody else's house, you can even find Marco Rubio's house if you want. I think he's at 8 feet, but everybody in Miami knows the elevation of their house, okay? And if you're going to buy one, find out before you buy. But go to Climate Central, Surging Seas, Risk Zone Maps, and you can find out whatever you want. I have that noted at the bottom of these pictures. It's already written there on your handout. So. But you can poke around. It's quite interesting. And okay, here's 7 feet and 10 feet. And as I pointed out in the handout, it's amazing. You're up quite high here, and it gets higher as you go inland. There's a coastal zone that's very low, and the barrier islands are all very low. But that's where you're headed, and these areas. I don't know. There was a gal up in Clearwater, I think it was, at some beaches meeting, a beach and shore meeting, and she was trying to keep property values up, you know, I think, but she said, look, she went at a 2 or 3 foot sea level rise. She said, look, your property's still there. Yeah, the footprint of every house was there, but everything else was underwater, you know, it's like, yeah. Okay, here's the Cortez area, 1 foot and 4 feet. You know, these are, and this area is really vulnerable. Okay, so, yeah, so, now, don't all go sell your property tomorrow, that won't work. But if you're buying into these areas, and if it's for an investment property, you know, think twice. If it's an investment for your grandkids, think twice, you know. Okay? So this is sort of the summary of Barrier Islands, what's going to happen. We're going to have more storm overwash. As sea level rises, the winter storms are going to overwash the island, sending sand across. It's going to have stronger flow and keep inlets that do new ones that form open more. And also storms are going to move sand offshore. And as it deepens offshore, the sand may stay there. Okay? So we have a real sand budget problem, and I noticed you have a very stable shoreline, but I noticed in looking just over the last 20 years on Google Earth, you've had a number of beach renourishment projects. So, and that's going to last less and less time as the rate of sea level rise kicks up, and it'll be lost faster and faster. So these become, and at some point, you know, you're not going to get the federal government and city and everybody else to bail you out. So you're going to be on your own with those. This is the south of Marco Island. These were 2 Collier County commissioners built houses on this side of the island, but the island moved, okay? So they're out in the middle of the ocean now. And there's another one, you can go on Google Earth down the south end of Cape Romano. There's another really funny dome house down here that's gone. But this is what happens with sea level rise. You will start to see what we would, as geologists say, the landward migration of the shore, what you would call horrible beach erosion, because that's what will happen. And if sea level starts rising too fast, we'll just leave it all behind and override it, okay? Orrin Pilkey at Duke says for every foot of sea level rise along shores like this, you can expect 500 to 2,000 feet of landward shift to the shore. Well, you've been pumping beach sand on to try to offset that, and we're still waiting for that to catch up. So the sea level rise from the past century, let alone what's ahead. This is Captiva. I like this. This is these are the areas greater than 5 feet elevation. Here's where it connects to Sanibel. Here's the little bridge. And so with a 2.5 foot sea level rise at high tide, that would be probably what's left at a nice high tide. But the problem is, it's going to be wise. It's probably going to look more like this because, you know, once you get a little bit of not much relief, you're going to just have the storms wash it away. And so that's sort of where we're headed. Should add a few little condos or something in there. And I love this picture because this is up the coast, but that's a barrier island, and like in Venice down here, they touch the mainland every now and then they go away. It's sort of like a stiff wire laid along the coast. And but it's like people would live there, you know. From this distance, it looks ridiculous, but once you're down, it's quite homey, quite lovely. But it's going to become a very risky place to live as sea level rises. Now, I just wanted to point out that I have a green and a red version of this. Can you see the vertical lines here and here and here and here? These are all old beach ridges, and you get up to over 125 or 150 feet up here. Every one of these is a nice quartz sand beach ridge. All these places you can go to up here, Sebring and others, and you can see nice sandy beach ridges. Okay, here's a red version of it. There's Orlando, but all these are old beach ridges. So in the past, we've had higher sea levels than today. Earlier, up to, this is over, the spine ridge is over a couple million years old. But, and these are just high stands, high interglacials when sea level was higher. And, which is a great source of beach sand if we want to haul it down and use it. But I just want to realize there's nothing special about where sea level is. It's not impossible or difficult. I don't know too much. Well, you have some pretty porous limestone underneath you. We have very porous limestone, and the Dutch are very disappointed because they're trying to help everybody in the world so they can make money to solve their problems. But they really are. But we can't have dikes around us. The water will come right up through. And that's a huge problem, okay? A couple more things on sea level before we start looking at ice. 120,000 years ago, which is not very long ago geologically, we were in the last interglacial. Sea level was about 20 feet higher. This is what we looked like back then. By the way, I have laid out in front here, you can look at it afterward, from 0 to 25 feet, 24 feet of sea level rise. But here we were at about 20 feet. And that's because we had a little more melting from Greenland and Antarctica. And then we went into an ice age, and gradually sea level dropped until 18,000 years ago. Sea level was about 420 feet below present level. Okay? Chicago was under a mile of ice. The ice sheet came down to southern Illinois, down to New York. Long Island, Cape Cod are the gravel piles and moraines in front of the ice. And then the interesting part for today is how we got from here 18,000 years ago to today. And we've been struggling with this, but what we see all across the continental shelves are old barrier islands, just like you have out here, old beach barrier islands, old reefs, old coastal mudflats and marshes that were suddenly just left there. And so the way we got from minus 420 feet to 0 was not sort of like this. It's a series of these pulses, boop, 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 as one ice sheet sector after another rapidly disintegrated. And these are, we're still trying to refine how fast these are. They are certainly 1 to 10 meters within a century, but they may have been even faster. And this is the problem. We have, as recording human beings, never witnessed a major ice melt. It's happened during the time of humans early humans being on Earth, but we don't have a record. Maybe the biblical flood or something, but we don't have a good record of it. And but this is what we learn. And this is our only solid guide to how to look at the future. And these models that do not incorporate all the accelerating feedbacks we're seeing with ice melt, those are incomplete. And those do not follow the philosophy that I just shared with you, that this is how it works, these rapid disintegration events. Okay, and that's important, that these rapid disintegration events of ice is how it works. And that must guide your consideration of the future. And once you understand that, you understand that our models are woefully low. If we have moved in now with the beginning of ice melt on Greenland and Antarctica, if we've moved into a time of rapid disintegration of ice, then it's going to be a big, quick one, okay? One other thing. I know some of you love graphs, some of you don't, but look at the red one. We go back 400,000 years here, a little over, and in the ice on Greenland and Antarctica are little bubbles of atmosphere. As the snow accumulates and buries, it traps layers after layer of a little bit of the atmosphere. And we can drill into the ice, which this is from Antarctica, and we can collect those bubbles and see what's in them. And we can learn all kinds of things. This is the carbon dioxide concentration recorded in those bubbles. And notice that during the interglacials, this is sea level, high times, carbon dioxide is about 280 parts per million, and it drops down to about 180 during the Ice Age, comes back up, 280. It's about a 100,000 year cycle. This is a natural cycle depending on how our orbit was more circular or more oval. How we presented ourselves to the sun. And this is one of the Milankovitch cycle elements. And this is what, it was that presentation to the sun, that slight cooling and heating, that drove us in and out of these ice ages, okay? And as we went from 280 to 180 and 280 to 180, and sea level was going from 0 to minus 100 meters, 0 to minus 100 meters, okay? So 100 meters of carbon dioxide fluctuation equaled about 100 parts per million, equal 100 meters of sea level fluctuation. Okay? Since the Industrial Revolution, we have gone not from 280 to 380, but we're at about 406 now. This keeps changing, a little over 3 parts per million per year. So we're headed up. So we've more than doubled what it took to go to cause 100 meters of sea level rise. Now, we only have enough enough ice left to go up another 220, 230 feet. We don't even have 100 meters of ice left, okay? So, but nevertheless, when you look, look what we've done. What would you expect to happen? Nothing? I don't think so. That's arrogant, and if you go out on the beach and put your head in the sand, I guarantee you'll drown, because this is... No, this is, I mean, how people can, I've shared about 5 or 6 things with you that are real. And how can you ignore these? How can you say, it's just a natural blip? No. When we go back to where we were now in time, last time we were at that level, sea level was 70 to 90 feet higher. And that's not rocket science, that's where it was when we were high. We're up there again. Now, the only thing we don't know is how fast. Okay, let me try to get a little bit into the ice. So Michael Mann's a great scientist, and he's a modeler. But this is an interview with The Guardian in 2012. He said the floating ice in the Arctic it's declining decades ahead of when models predicted. The melting of the polar ice sheets may occur more rapidly than the models had predicted. We could see disastrous consequences of climate change far sooner than expected. All the models we have seem to get the trends right now, but they don't get the rates at all right, okay? From what I've shared with you, I think that the reinforcing feedbacks are making future rapidly accelerating sea level rise inevitable, unstoppable, and probably faster than anticipated. what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes looking at the big causes of warming. We're going to continue warming the ocean, and it'll probably be maybe another 8 inches a century rate. Sort of like cooking a steak. It gets in slowly and does its warming. We're seeing accelerating of almost all the alpine glaciers, but we're seeing rapidly accelerating ice melt in Greenland and West Antarctica, and East Antarctica now. And we're seeing the floating ice in the Arctic rapidly diminishing, which is equally as important. Here's some pictures Lynn and I took. She has an orphanage in India. On the way back, we stop and revisit some places I was with my dad in the late 50s and look at the ice melt. This is the Mer de Glace near Chamonix in France. Here's the Grossglockner in the Alps of Austria. Everywhere you go, you're seeing this rapid loss, and every bit of that is contributing to sea level. Okay, here we are in Greenland, and this is a wonderful picture. Lynn's showing you that you can go there in style, believe me. There you do. You go to Ilulissat, there's a 4-star hotel. The Arctic Hotel is wonderful. Take along a friend with a lot of money because the helicopters are over $5,000 an hour, but to charter them for your own use. But do it. Drag them along, and it's unbelievable. It's one of the most beautiful places we've ever been, but it's also one of the most sobering experiences you'll have. So now you understand some of the things going on. The other important thing about this picture is where Lynn's standing, that's where the ice sheet was the year before. Okay? This is rapidly retreating, okay? Here was the ice melt at the top of the salmon color in 1992. The white line, if you can see it, is the 2,000-meter contour. The height of the ice sheet on Greenland rises up to over 3,000 meters, over 10,000 feet. In 2005, the red areas were melting for at least a short while in the summer. In 2012, Lynn and I were flying from Iceland across to Ilulissat, which is right here, and looking out the south out of the plane, everything was glistening on the ice. It was like, oh my God. Well, for 2 weeks in 2012, unanticipated in the models or projections, 98% of the ice sheet was melting. And this is happening. Then as it's melting, all the dirt that had accumulated in the snow from the Gobi Desert dust and the black soot and the brown soot and so on is accumulating on the surface. So we chartered a helicopter, there it is, and to collect the dirt. Well, it snowed the night before, so here's our Christmas card anyhow. But we got plenty of the dirt, plenty of the stuff on the surface. And but it's unbelievable flying around because the surface for over 100 miles onto the ice sheet is rivers and lakes, and these aren't trivial, you know, these are meltwater rivers. And these things go down sinkholes called moulins to the bottom and are starting to lift the ice, even though it's thick, off and starting to slide more. And in 2007, scientists were worried it was all going to start to slide in. But of course it fractured up. And the fracturing, here's the dirt you can see. But the fracturing is it's like good, okay, the water drains out. But the problem is that there was an article came out and said if I had a big piece of ice, this is a model, I could melt it in 1,000 years. If I fractured every 20 meters, I can melt it in a couple of decades. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The meltwater is getting down all these cracks, it's warming the ice, and the only analog I can think of as the ice warms is like going from hard butter to soft butter. It's a crystalline substance, but it's still much more flowy as it heats up. And so it's really picking up, okay? But all that we're seeing on the surface in Greenland, which is striking, is not the big story. The big story is the ocean water, the warmed ocean, is getting up on both the east and the west coasts of Greenland and getting in the outlet fjords and penetrating deep under the ice sheet. Here's a map from 2014 where they were able to strip off the ice and see these deep fjords going in under the ice into the interior of Greenland. The way the ice pushes the land below sea level. And so here's Ilulissat here, and here's this fjord. You go up to the ice sheet begins where the blue is, and here's the, this is where we flew in on the ice sheet once. But here's Ilulissat, this ice fjord. There's a big gravel pile here at about 200 meters depth that the big icebergs hang up on. 2007, here's the calving face where the ice of the ice sheet was collapsing, new ice to the ocean. When we were there in 2012, it was back here. There was a National Science Foundation camp here that we visited. The next picture, we were putting out time-lapse cameras from, this is one from here, we're just taking off from here. National Science Foundation camp was over here across the ice fjord. That's about 100-meter high calving face of the ice. This is all loose ice. Here's the trim line where only a few decades before the ice was and the plants haven't had a chance to grow. There's another calving face there, that's about 100 meters high. You're looking onto the ice sheet. Here's the National Science Foundation camp. They've been out there 2 weeks. Lynn and I brought them out, lemon cake and lettuce and, you know, blue cheese dressing. We were very welcome. So. But what's amazing is they were watching, and they had all these gadgets to radar and time lapse and stuff to measure stuff. This is about 100 meters high. But in the past, that this calving face was going about twice a week. In 2012, it was collapsing 4 times a day. Here's one of these events. If you go online, these are big. This is all that's new ice to the ocean. Here is in meters, if you'd rather have meters. But this is new ice to the ocean. This is where our future is. It doesn't matter what you do to the beach here. Our future is that, okay? And so that was right at the calving front, which was back here. We flew back in on that fjord under the ice. We flew over it, and we went about 80 miles in on the ice sheet, and it was like flying up a dry river valley. The warm water getting in from below, it was melting it and collapsing it. So it's about 500 feet lower here, here than the main ice sheet level. And the other thing is that this fracturing is just amazingly fractured up. And the summer before last, in a 4-day period, 5 kilometers, 3 miles of ice shot out of this fjord because it was so fractured up. It was just like toothpaste squeezing out. So this is how acceleration begins, and this is weakening everything around it. Now we're back at the front edge where the gravel pile is, the moraine. Ilulissat's over here. But I wanted to go out here. These icebergs are grounded, so they're sort of safe to be around. And they're sort of grounded. But I wanted to see this warm water coming in. This warm water is about 2 degrees Celsius, maybe 3. It's not your normal swimming water. And that goes in and does a lot of melting, and then the fresher, colder water comes out. Sort of like an estuary circulation. But we went in here in a boat. It was too much ice to take a metal boat, so we took a wooden boat with a little metal on the bottom. And I had a thermometer to record temperature, and I put a 5-pound rock on the bottom. And I lowered it down, and when I was at about 700 feet, it was hanging straight down the line. And the temperature recorded on there about 0.5 degree, the boat, 0. And then I lowered it down, and it took this 20-degree swing going in with the whole line with the rock on the bottom. And the temperature had warmed up to about 2.5 degrees. So that was the warm water going in. It's powerfully going in. And this is happening not just here. That was a beautiful place to do research. But that's not just happening on Greenland. This is happening in the West Antarctic ice sheet also. Increased wind shear around Antarctica is causing increased upwelling, and the Coriolis effect, Coriolis force, is pulling the surface water away. and that upwell water is warmer, and it's getting in under the West Antarctic ice sheet through the Pine Island and the Thwaites and some other outlet glacial fjords. And in 2015, they also found out it was getting in under the East Antarctic ice sheet. If all of Greenland were to melt, it could raise sea level about 23 feet. If the West Antarctic ice sheet were to melt, it could do about 25 feet. East Antarctic is big. The way this is working is the warm water comes in, here's the ice, here's the atmosphere, here's the water, here's the gravel or rock sill, and the ice is jammed a minute against it. When the warm water gets in it, it starts to melt it, and what happens is the warm water gets in, but the weight of the ice has pushed the land down, so it's easier and easier to penetrate further. By the way, the thinning of the ice here is both through melting from below, and also once it's detached from the bottom, it's through what's called dynamic thinning. That's like a stack of books on a desk and they all of a sudden go just splay out. That's what happens with the fracturing, okay? And so what we're seeing is that these outlet fjords here are having an easy time. This is over 3,000 meters deep here. So as it goes further in, these all deepen in. And this is going to be easier and easier to have melting go in, okay? And finally, the accelerating melting of the Arctic Ocean you'd think doesn't matter, but it does, because it was the frozen Arctic Ocean through the summer that kept the permafrost and the Arctic Ocean cold. And here, this picture from 2007, a picture from Santa's workshop, you can see that all these leads, all this is absorbing heat and further warming the system, whereas the ice would have reflected almost everything. This is an article from 2002, and it's wonderful because it projected how much ice would be left at the end of the summer melt by 2050. And they had that, much less. I guess they had the Northwest Passage over. Well, by 2012, we were beyond where they had suggested. Again, the models got the trend right, they didn't get the rates. Who cares? It's floating ice. Well, this warmed water is accelerating ice melt in northern Greenland. It is melting the methane hydrates on the Siberian shelf. I'll explain that. And it's melting the permafrost, and the organic matter frozen in it is decaying, releasing methane and carbon dioxide. A methane hydrate is a methane molecule with water ice around it. And you can dredge it up and set it on fire. As we warm the ocean, the methane hydrates in the Siberian shelf and elsewhere around here are melting, and you can see it bubbling out. This is a sonar scan thing. And that is of huge concern, okay? And also of concern is the melting the permafrost. The permafrost is around the Arctic Ocean because it kept it frozen. And it has huge amounts of organic matter. Ted Stewart at the University of Florida says 3 to 5 meters of permafrost are expected to melt in the coming 100 years. Organic decay from melting the upper 3 meters of permafrost will release through the decay of the organics as much carbon dioxide as is presently in the atmosphere. So about the time that you buy a Prius and plant 10 trees and you think all is well, whack, okay? No, this is where we're headed. Jim Hansen is our outstanding climate scientist. He gave a talk to Congress in 1980 explaining where we'd be in 2000, and he was right on. He's always up above, more extreme than the modelers and everybody else. He, in 2007, 2012, and 2016, has written, he's had to rewrite it because all the sea level modelers are biting at his ankles, but he said amplifying feedbacks make ice sheet disintegration necessarily highly nonlinear. He said it's plausible to have a 10-year doubling time of sea level rise from 1 millimeter a year average in the 2005 to 2015 period doubling Ponzi scheme style, we'll end up with a 5-meter rise by 2095. We're running ahead of Hansen's prediction just looking at Greenland. The GRACE satellites are 2 satellites that circle Earth chasing each other, and they go up and down depending on the mass that is under them. And they measure this mass and in these little pixels, and they do it through time, so they can see a change in mass during the melt of the summer in Greenland and the buildup of the snow in the winter and the melt. And you can see that we're losing mass every year, and you see that the curve is steepening downwards. So it's accelerating the loss. And so here in 2003, we lost about 150 gigatons of ice or water. And that was equivalent to a global sea level rise of about 0.4 millimeters. Doesn't sound like much. But in 7 years later, 2010, the net loss was 350 gigatons. 362 gigatons equals 1 millimeter of global sea level rise. So we had more than double this within 7 years, just looking at Greenland. That's just a short period of time. Where that will head, we don't know. What I've shown you tonight is that rapid sea level rise is how, pulses of rapid sea level rise is how sea level will work. And we've seen the beginning of ice melt on Greenland and Antarctica. Hansen has a great article out in 2016 if you want to tackle it, showing how many of the accelerating feedbacks that we can't model, the effect they will have. But I would guess we're in the middle of one of these, beginning of one of these pulses of sea level rise. And we're not intelligent enough, knowledgeable enough to say if this is going to mean you have to have a problem on your barrier island in 5 years or 90 years. But it's coming, okay? And, but we should start planning. And one of the things we're not doing, and we're always worried about ourselves, but you know, think of all the things you couldn't demand, you couldn't stand to lose. Our National Archives. Look where the Smithsonian is. It's an old sea level swamp, you know? It's not above sea level. Why do we have it there? Shouldn't we be rethinking that? Global seed banks. I can take you to seed banks in Norway that are less than 20 feet above sea level. This is supposed to be our future when all goes wrong. You can read through this list, but these, and then come to agriculture functionality. 6-7 feet of sea level rise is going to start to do in our deltas, where all over the world we have huge areas. This is a delta near Lynn's orphanage in the Godavari River area. But these are huge breadbaskets for the nations they are on in the world. And we have to be thinking, whoa, I skipped. So what I've tried to show you tonight is that our coastal future, you have to look to the Arctic, along with your friend with a lot of money for the helicopter. But things are really coming apart there, you know? And this is one feedback that's not in the models. This darkening the surface. And Michael Mann said, wow, we probably should put that in our models. Well, if you've lived up north, you know how to melt snow. You throw dark stuff on it, okay? Let me just conclude with a couple pictures of Miami-Dade County, Broward County, at 2-foot intervals. They don't have the coastal ridge we do. That's their airport. This is a blue-collar neighborhood. They don't know how good they got it, I guess, if you want to be on an island. Isn't that unbelievable? Okay, back to you all. All right? And then in front here, I have a series of maps that Peter Harlem made. He was a student of mine. He just died, unfortunately, but just before he died, he made these maps. And they're going up by 1-foot increments, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. Sarasota's right, the red dot there, I believe. It's very interesting, you know, 7 feet, 8 feet. You look pretty good back here. You go right up to high ground here pretty nicely. What's interesting is north of here, the St. Johns River comes down. And, but you watch as we go on up this whole area here. And by the way, this does not erode any organic soils or anything. This is just the inundation of the present topography. So if you're eroding something or building, my gosh, look at this area here and this area here. You're still golden, you know? You're not, though, because we're all going to come and move to you. That's the reality. No, that's the reality. Everybody thinks, oh, Miami has a problem. No, we don't have a problem. We're leaving. You have the problem. You have a bunch of idiots from Miami coming to mess up your life. I mean, no, this is real. 23. There it is. But look at the step back in the coast. Isn't that unbelievable? This is about where we were at the last sea level stand, okay? We have a choice of making this a progressive, orderly process. And that's what I'm trying to get communities to do, in which there can be planning and help and cleaning the land before inundation. We never talk about that. We have all our dumps, all our polluted industrial areas. Are we going to leave our kids a polluted, shallow marine environment? Or are we going to just not plan and have catastrophic chaos? You know, you've watched civilization's a very delicate thread to hold together, and polluted wetlands and so on. So that's a real problem. The choice is really ours. Also, this is what I just said, we're going to come to you. And places like Gainesville, it's 142 feet, they should be setting aside the natural areas, the water resources, the agriculture areas they want. So we don't suddenly just charge in, because it will happen that way. And, but we could plan and have some pretty cool new communities. And this is true whether it's in Gainesville or Orlando or Vermont or anywhere. And the deniers like to talk about the uncertainty of the uncertainty. So we're uncertain and we don't know anything. Don't buy in. The only thing we're not certain about is when there will be a pulse of rapid sea level rise. But it will happen, and it may well be starting now. Marco Rubio said, China's putting out more CO2 than we were. Well, he waited till the year when they were doing that. Per capita, we're still 5 times the lead of the Chinese. And half their emissions are to make junk for us anyhow. So, you know, so we're still really the problem, and we should get hold of this and take the lead. And I just hope Trump won't renege on this Paris thing, because even though that's not enough, it was a head in the right direction. And I think we could be great leaders in this world. And Marco Rubio used to know about it when he was in the Florida house, and he said, what you guys are doing is so important, and there's so much money to be made. I said, well, there's a good Republican. Go make your money, but get involved with it. And yeah, and finally, to the students that are here, I really wish I was 20 again. There's so many amazingly important things for students to embark on a life doing. And it doesn't matter what your area of interest is. It can be law, architecture, all the sciences, and on and on and on, engineering. But, you know, there's so many things we have to do. And a lot of our students in geology are going into ice, because ice used to be a backwater glaciologist or a backwater bearded guy walking around in the summer with a pole on the ice. But now that's the most dynamic thing and the most disconcerting thing we have, and it's so complicated, the physics of ice. But to become true leaders of the future, you have to thoroughly understand everything about this climate change thing that I just edged into, including things I haven't talked about, like acidification, aridification, a little more about coastal erosion, extreme weather events, and of course, these sorts of things that complicate everything we try to do. And the last slide is that if you want to get involved, there are a couple people here. Where are you? Stand up. And they're from Citizens Climate Lobby. It's a national group of very energized national group whose purpose is to get Congress to establish a carbon fee, which things like groups like Exxon are amenable to, actually. And, you know, businesses can work with the reality you know. And the efforts of the climate lobby in South Florida has gotten all but one of the legislatures, the congressmen and women south of Lake Okeechobee, to co-sponsor and introduce a bill on climate, went in a couple of weeks ago. And that took a lot of work, but mayors, congresspeople, Republican and Democrat, are starting to understand that citizens care about this. So this is a really good way to get involved. These are some of the originating leaders here. And yeah, so that's a good thing to do. And thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
We've got some time for questions, and there's probably a microphone that's going to go around. As that goes, I want to tell you all there's a March for Science happening this Saturday. There's going to be some flyers outside. This is one way you could get involved. It's this Saturday on Earth Day. So get out there and just show people that you support continued research and into what we can do. Questions? Yeah.
Dr. Wanless, thank you very much. I'm a 40-year-old student, so I encourage everybody here to continue learning and doing things. I appreciated all the scientific figures you had up there. There were a lot of figures that were not just done on desktops or with instrumentation, but done from space. And I just wanted you to comment on how important NOAA and NASA Earth Science and remote sensing and satellites and making sure we understand that is to understanding climate science and understanding the effects of climate change.
On my, yeah, it's hugely important. On my, that's historical sea level diagram that got a little steeper, early slide. The last bit I didn't point out was a black line. And we now measure sea level by satellite, change in global sea level. We measure the Earth's surface with satellite. It's been challenged by all kinds of deniers, but it works, and it's amazing. And that's how we're monitoring sea level. When Nixon was in office, he found it a waste of money to have all these tide gauges all over the world, so he stopped them. That was a disaster, because that's all we had back then. And we now have everything from our satellite information, from productivity to it's unbelievable the kind of things we get out. And we also, our satellites are measuring methane, carbon dioxide. There are all kinds of things we're actually measuring. And it's absolutely crucial that, well, let me put it this way, it's absolutely crucial that we maintain an intensely functional look at the important parts of our science. At the risk of offending people, I will say that I think sometimes the federal government could have farmed out things to do to companies or universities instead of hiring people. I think some of the units got too big. I know I saw back in the 70s, NOAA got a little off of their applied science thing, and they were having a great time looking at all the black smokers on the ocean spreading thing. It didn't have anything to do with national security or anything. And they had to get pulled back in. And I hope what Trump is doing ends up just being a reining in of the excess, not hurting the fundamental things. And yeah, so, you know, government, like any of us, if we can get away with it, we can do lots of stuff and get big. And so I hope he's just trying to rein it in and not damage what is absolutely crucial. This GRACE satellite thing, I don't think we have a replacement for it, but that has given us so much knowledge about everything. And it was supposed to be done in 2013. I don't know if we're still getting data or not. We might be. Yeah, so this is crucial, and that's the kind of place you can play a role. You can call your congressman or woman, your senator, and saying, don't do this. Don't let them do this. You know, what a president wants to do is one thing, the purse strings are somewhere else. So the Congress and the Senate has a lot of control over things too. Other questions?
Yes, would you comment on our personal habits? I understand that cows put out more methane and other gases than all of our transportation combined. Is that true?
You've been reading Dave Barry, probably.
That's why I'm asking. It's an urban myth.
Termites you have to really watch out for.
What?
It's termites you really have to watch
Termites, there are a lot of things that produce methane.
Yes, but we weren't talking about the Congress. What I'm asking is what personal habits we might be able to change that make the most difference other than buying an electric car or putting solar on the roof?
Those are good ones to start with. You know, conservation is the beginning of not doing excess. And so anything you can do, from changing the thermostats to anything else, they're all important. And don't get me wrong in this talk. We have to stop burning fossil fuels, period. We have to start getting carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And maybe if we do, we can make it so it's not going to be 70 feet. Maybe it'll only be 40 feet. Well, that doesn't do a lot of good for Miami Beach or somewhere like that, but it does a lot for the world. And, you know, there are a lot of things that are tough. China, uncontrolled coal fires down in mines, many of them not started by humans, are putting out as much CO2 as all of our automobiles in the United States. You know, it's like, whoa, that's crazy. Well, there's so many things like that we've let get away from us. And I don't know how you tell China it's hard to shut off these coal fires. We have them up in Pennsylvania too, down. They've had to evacuate parts of towns and stuff because of it. But there's just so many things. But the big one is we have to get off the fossil fuel thing. And the only way to do that is to educate your friends. I'm here to talk to you. I love talking to you. It's very nice. But there are other things I'd like to do too. But I feel I have to do this so we get a critical mass of people to start really making real change. And that's where you play a role, because we do a thing in Miami called Empowering Capable Climate Communicators. It's a 2-Saturday thing. We do it in February. And what we do is train people and give them all the PowerPoints and everything so they can go out and start to work with their sphere of influence. And I think the education we're still unfortunately in that thing. And demand transparency from your communities. There's no reason not to. Well, 21 mayors in Miami-Dade County wrote all the Republican candidates last July saying, please incorporate meaningful sea level and climate policy into your platform. 21 mayors. So things are changing. They're realizing that their clients, you, are starting to care about this. Yes, sir.
I think what will really make a change is when the homes on the Barrier Islands and the commercial interests on the Barrier Islands, when they no longer can get insurance for them. When you can't get a homeowner's insurance, and if it's destroyed, then it's going to be totally your responsibility. The problem is right now that the federal flood insurance is paid for by the taxpayers, and a lot of these homes on the Barrier Islands are funded by us. But if they can be, that's how you could make the...
And why are we letting them rebuild there when it's too risky? Well, both Governors Cuomo and Christie, after Hurricane Sandy, tried to buy out the low areas. Yeah. And they got such crap that they finally just threw their arms up.
Well, there's going to be a point where the insurance companies won't insure them at all.
That's right. And there are two problems. First of all, the 30-year mortgage will disappear. And suddenly your house, if they're only getting 15-year mortgages, your house is worth about half as much because I can't buy it at the level I would have.
Well, the other problem is that it used to be about 7 or 8 years before they had beach replenishment, and now it's like 2 to 3 years before they have beach replenishment, and you're talking $20-30 million every crack.
No, I don't know who pays for it here, but
it's the taxpayers.
That's the way it's going to have to be, because governments can't afford this anymore, and that's going to be a sobering thing. That's a very sobering thing, but it's important that you understand where you're headed. And it's important that the governments honestly show you where you're headed. Nobody's going to tell you that you're going to be at 2 feet by 2048. That was a projection. But when you're at 2 feet, you know what you're in for, you know? That's the important thing. And governments can do that. They can look, that's what Jim Cason's doing in Coral Gables. Every 6 inches of sea level rise, what do I have to upgrade to maintain an integrated infrastructure, and how much does it cost? Well, that's when the rubber hits the road. You say, whoa, we can't afford that. Pinecrest, a small community south of Coral Gables, tried to figure out how to get rid of water quickly, not to prevent flooding, but either heavy rains or high tides, how to get rid of the water quickly for the next 8 inches of sea level rise. It was $40 million. They're a little community. They're not a poor community, but they don't have $40 million, and they can't take out the bonds like Miami Beach does. So, you know, it's important that you look where you're headed. I think the worst thing that's happening in Florida right now is that there's no real warnings of when you buy a house. People come down here, you know, you probably did too. It's lovely. And you buy in and you think you're buying something for your grandkids. There should be a warning. We have I don't know where, it's over there right now. It'll get here.
Perhaps I missed it, but you spoke of the Congress having a plan to work some of these problems out. Am I right?
They put in, just recently, the Florida congressional delegation was, I think, part of a group that put in a plan to recognize, saying we understand sea level, we need to start doing things about it. There was no plan.
This is a state plan.
This was a federal plan.
Do you expect that the Congress, as constituted now, will be able to overcome the executive part, particularly with the EPA and the people who have been appointed who do not believe in and have done the things they have to do away with what you're asking for, what we want to have?
Okay, my answer to that is, as I said, I think some parts of government may have gotten a little big. And I have hope that all they're doing is refining government. I'm deeply worried about EPA with Pruitt in it. Perry, on the other hand, when he was governor of Texas, he turned an oil state into a wind farm, huge wind farm. And he was told by Trump to go do what you did in Texas. Now, I don't know what else he did in Texas, but if he does that, that's a good start. Tillerson has said, don't drop out of the Paris Accord. We worked too hard to get all those nations to agree. Now, I hope he'll hold sway over Trump. I think losing, what's the guy's, Bannon? I think having him a little more out of the way may be very beneficial. I hope Trump listens to his daughter now and then, because she understands climate change. Yes, ma'am.
I have a two-part question.
Go.
One is, how much do you think deforestation has contributed to this problem?
Huge, and you have mangroves around here, right? So, you know, mangroves, we deforested mangroves. We smothered them all and built on them, you know, and there are a lot of areas around here that were mangroves are now filled long ago. And the red mangrove is amazing. Half the biomass of the red mangrove is in the root system. So when you see a mangrove go down, there's another equal biomass dies. Probably the most effective tree to help sequester carbon, pull carbon out of the atmosphere, is the red mangrove, because it's rapidly growing, it makes huge root complexes, and it preserves the root material for a while. Jim Hansen said probably the best thing to do to be sequestering carbon is to plant 1 million square miles of trees in areas where, at least for a while, they will hold soil, build their soil. And the mangroves are the leader of those. So, I don't know. And what we're doing, I'm fighting Everglades Park, because hurricane, Andrew came through in '92, knocked down 80,000 acres of mangroves, and they watched. They said, well, this is a natural system. I said, no, part of it was global warming. Well, we don't know what part was global warming, so we can't help them recover. No, and mangroves, you know the value of mangroves. There's so many things. And not only that, they separate the ocean from the land and everything else, and they sequester carbon. Why weren't we aggressively helping them regrow? So, yeah.
And my other question is, have you made this presentation to Sarasota County officials?
No, but I'm always available. The other thing we have in South Florida is in this Empowering Cable Climate Communicators training thing, after the first year, 7 years ago, Caroline Lewis had a CLEO organization that was an environmental organization, and she turned it into a climate education program. And she's been honored by the White House and everything for her efforts. But they go around and they'll do 2 or 3 day workshops for everybody, all the people employed by Fort Lauderdale or Broward County or wherever you want. They do that, and they're really good at that. I'm always available to come talk to any officials, because it's the officials.
They don't know anything about this that you're talking about.
Well, I know. And as I said, Naples thought this was a Miami problem a few years ago. They're starting to get their feet on the ground. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you address the red tide situation and how that's affected by the raising temperature of the water?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person, but
I know it's not geology, but
it was interesting. There were places out on the West Florida shelf that all of a sudden there'd be a red tide. And it turned out there were cave conduits that floodwaters would shoot out and then come up out there. And it was a mixture of pollution and temperature and things like that, and nutrients. Yeah, it's tough. It's a horrible one. And you have it terribly along this coast. I sympathize with you. I shouldn't say more or I'll be throwing the bull. So.
You've talked about carbon dioxide as the prime pollutant and so on. What about, how does that compare to methane? One of the ladies over there mentioned methane, for example, and other things that we, should we make a particular effort to reduce that as well, or is carbon dioxide the biggie?
The one that has the potential of becoming frightfully big is methane, because CH4, methane, one molecule of methane does the global warming work of 50 molecules of carbon dioxide, or 30 to 50. It's a powerful gas. And that's what's being released from the methane hydrates. That's what's being released from your cows and your termites and everything else, rice paddies and all this. But the big one is the permafrost and the methane hydrates. In about a decade, methane, CH4, combines with oxygen, O2, to make carbon dioxide and water. So it'll eventually degrade to a less thing, but if we have sudden bursts of it, it's going to be frightful levels of warming. Nitrous oxides are another one. Chlorofluorocarbons, one molecule of them does the global warming work of 20,000 carbon dioxide molecules. Fortunately, we're playing those down a bit through other efforts. Yeah, the methane is probably the most concern to me as we look down the century because of what's happening in the Arctic. And I have a student this year that's sort of economically oriented. He's trying to write a paper about how to release methane. I mean, if it's coming out, you might as well capture and burn it, get it done with, so we don't have that decade of high levels. And I think the Japanese are looking the same way. I don't know where the machine is.
All right, we just have maybe just one more question, and then we're going to have to give Dr. Wallace a break because he's spoken for a long time.
And while you're getting there, up front I have those 0 to 24 feet of sea level rise maps laid out. I think you may enjoy them. Yes.
You had something up there on your presentation talking about aridification, And we've been really busy building a bunch of subdivisions out in Manatee County, getting ready for you people from Miami to come up here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And they take the plows and plow down every tree and plant. And is this going to cause like a major climate change in the area?
Well, I
Contribute?
am of the understanding when they straighten the, what is it, the Kissimmee River above Lake Okeechobee, they channelized it, that area lost its rainfall because it was shallow wetlands and the water evaporated and came up and down. The proposal for South Florida is as we flood the Everglades with rising sea level, our rainfall will drop from about 60 inches a year probably down to about 30 because Key West only has like 25 or 30 inches. So, because we're at least down there, we're right in the desert belt. Yeah, the climate scientists at the University of Miami say, to make it simple, the dry areas will get drier and the wet areas are going to get wetter. I like that kind of complexity, so I can remember that. So, and this is part of the problem. At the same time, we're being driven away from the coast. You know, I'm not going to name names in New Mexico or Arizona, but places there, people may be being driven out of those areas too. And there are going to be places, if we keep our warming up, that places in Iran and so on, that may be too hot to live. That's not pretty. Thank you very much.
All right, let's thank our speaker. Thank you all for coming and being concerned, and good job.